Located in the northeast of the Indian Ocean lies North Sentinel Island, an island completely prohibited from visitation. It is home to a tribe of indigenous people called the Sentinelese, a tribe who have voluntarily isolated themselves completely from the outside world. Since 1956, it was deemed illegal to travel any closer than 5 miles to the island, so much so that the area is often patrolled by the Indian Navy. But even if you were able to get by them, the tribe on the island itself wouldn't give you a particularly warm welcome. Another island nearby holds residence to other indigenous people known as the Onga, and they were actually the ones to have found the other land. The Onga and the Sentinelese do have strong cultural similarities, from what we know of them at least. Around 60,000 years ago, Africans migrated across the world, and it's believed that some of these may have been the ones who now inhabit North Sentinel Island. In 1771, British surveyor John Ritchie was on an East Indian vessel passing by the island when he noticed a bunch of lights coming from there. He didn't explore it any further, but it would later be believed to have been bonfires. In March of 1867, Administrator Jeremiah Homfray actually decided to visit the island. "We saw some 10 men on the beach, naked, long-haired and with bows and arrows shooting fish. Though as soon as the tribe saw the boat, they all ran and hid, and Homfray did not enter the island." That same year, an Indian merchant ship Nineveh crashed near the island, with 106 survivors being washed up on the beach. But they were then attacked by the local Sentinelese tribe. However, they were rescued by the Royal Navy not long after. The Ongas actually were brought on to North Sentinel Island during the 19th century by the British, but they couldn't understand the language the Sentinelese were speaking despite being from a nearby area, suggesting that they were a tribe that had been around a lot longer than the Ongas. After all, some countries in Europe share similar sounding languages from around 2,000 years ago, but these two very similar tribes couldn't communicate, suggesting the Sentinelese were from much earlier. It's also believed that due to the similarities, the Ongas and the Sentinelese may have been enemies in the past, leading to their isolation. Furthermore, some witnesses have claimed that turtles, who do in fact inhabit the waters around the island, seemed highly afraid of the Sentinelese people, which is definitely worth noting as turtles take an exceptionally long time to learn the emotion of fear. In fact, it's believed that it can take the animal tens of thousands of years to adapt to this nature, suggesting that the Sentinelese have actually been around a lot longer than when we first discovered them. In January 1880, government administrator Maurice Vidal Portman wanted to research the natives and their customs, and even reach the island. Him and his group found a bunch of pathways and several small abandoned villages. They consisted of lean huts with slanted roofs, all facing one another, with a carefully tended fire outside each one. After a few days on the island, Portman and his team kidnapped 6 Sentinelese consisting of 4 children and an elderly couple, and took them to Port Blair, the capital of the islands. However, they all got sick, and the old couple unfortunately passed away, while the children were sent back home, still unwell. It's uncertain if they spread it to the rest of the tribe or what even happened to them after this. It was even believed at one point that the tribesmen were cannibals, but all evidence suggests they just bury the remains, and there's nothing to show that they actually eat them. The fact that the tribe isolate themselves from the outside world would mean they lack our immunization to diseases, but it would explain why they're so hesitant to allow anyone in, especially since 6 of their own grew sick as soon as they were taken away and exposed to a different area and different people. On August the 27th, 1883, nearby Krakatoa erupted, but it was accidentally mistaken for gunfire and believed to have been the distress signal of a ship. This led to Portman returning to the island and leaving them some gifts. He would continue to do this several times between 1885 and 1887. However, it has been widely speculated that Maurice Vidal Portman was actually a paedophile. He always showed great interest in not only the Sentinelese tribe, but the surrounding ones as well, supposedly taking questionable photographs of the children and young men, sometimes in sexual positions. He would even measure their anatomies, particularly their genitalia. This led to even more theories, as the 4 Sentinelese children were in his care for weeks before being returned. We don't know what he may or may not have done to them during those weeks, but it may very well be the reason they are so hesitant to trust outsiders to this day, over a century later. In 1896, an escaped convict attempted to flee the Great Andaman Island on a raft he had made on his own, and he ended up washing ashore on North Sentinel Island, believing that he had escaped. A search party would later find his remains just a few days later, filled with arrow wounds and with his throat cut. This was when the British decided to leave the people in peace, and the island gained its independence in 1947. After visitation was banned, Indian exploration still continued as they wanted to establish a friendship with the Sentinelese, beginning in 1967. Director of Anthropological Survey of India, Pandit, visited the island. Him and his team were able to deliver friendly gifts to them, but they still failed to understand any of their language. Though Pandit's team also did steal from the tribe, taking their buckets and some of their bows and arrows away. He did keep trying to make contact afterwards, dropping off coconuts and other gifts before quickly leaving. They gave them live pigs, which the Sentinelese quickly speared and buried in the sand, which they also did with plastic toys. However, they did enjoy the coconuts, which didn't appear to grow on the island, and they also liked metal pots and pans. Pendit would continue to deliver these, but the Sentinelese would always have bows and arrows pointed at him and his team until they left the island. Pendit believed they were finally beginning to gain their trust, and these visits would continue for nearly 25 years. In 1970, India claimed the island as its own and even dropped a stone tablet on the beach to confirm it, but the Sentinelese didn't show any response. In 1974, a visit was planned with a documentary film crew even coming along, but the director was shot in the thigh with an arrow. In 1975, Leopold III of Belgium was on a tour of the area, and then an overnight cruise to North Sentinel Island. He was warned off with arrows, but he actually really enjoyed the experience. In the middle of 77, cargo ship MV Ruseley crashed onto the island, as did MV Primrose on August 2nd, 1981. The Sentinelese ended up wrecking both ships and even stealing their iron, adapting and using the metal for their bows and arrows. Though locals from Port Blair did visit the island to recover the cargo, and in 1991 operators were sent to finally dismantle the ships, though the remains can still be seen from above. However, after the Primrose landed, crewmen noticed the Sentinelese were carrying spears and knives, and were building small narrow canoes on the beach, using long sticks to maneuver the boat. They were using these to fish and harvest crabs, and it's believed they live off fruits on the island, and maybe eggs of seagulls or turtles, or even wild pigs or birds. They would weave mesh baskets and at night would create bonfires and even sing. The captain ordered an urgent drop of firearms so they could defend themselves. However, a huge storm erupted, disallowing this. However, this also prevented the Sentinelese from approaching the crew, and they would be rescued a week later by helicopter. On January 4th, 1991, Pendit became the first person to ever make peaceful contact with the tribe after 24 years of frequent visits building their trust. However, this visit was a lot different to their previous encounters. The tribe entered the beach to retrieve their usual gifts, but ventured a lot closer to the visitors than ever before, and without weapons. However, later that day when the visitors returned, there were around 24 Sentinelese on the beach. One man raised his bow towards them, but a nearby woman pushed it back down. The man then dropped the bow and arrow and buried it in the sand, and the tribe then rushed out to collect their gifts. The visitors would then return a few weeks later, but after a while, a Sentinelese man did draw his knife and signal that they had stayed for too long and needed to leave. If we tried to venture into their territory without respecting their wishes or got too close for comfort, they would turn their backs on us and sit down on their haunches as if to defecate. That was meant to be an insult. If we didn't pay heed and stop, they would shoot arrows as a last resort. During all of these visits, however, the Sentinelese never returned the favour, giving gifts to the visitors. They never invited them further onto the island, and neither side learned to speak the opposed language. And they would still often greet them with bows and arrows at the ready. In 2004, the Indian Ocean suffered a massive ocean earthquake, causing a tsunami, but the Sentinelese survived. Just 3 days after the event, the Indian government had a helicopter fly over the island to check on them, but the tribe shot arrows and threw spears and stones at them. They refused any help. In January 2006, Sunder and Pendit Tiwari were fishing illegally in the prohibited waters before falling asleep, but their anchor broke and their boat accidentally drifted onto the island. They were then killed by the Sentinelese people. In November 2018, 26-year-old US missionary John Allen Chau was heading to the island illegally, planning to preach Christianity to the Sentinelese. 7 people were arrested on suspicion of helping him reach the island. It's believed that he stood on the beach singing hymns and they chased him away twice, before they finally caught him and he was murdered by the tribe. Nearby fishermen even informed police that they saw the Sentinelese dragging his body around, but no charges were pressed. Chau was fully aware of the danger before going because he had already visited the island twice before, one of which when he was shot by a bow and arrow from the tribe and survived. Before heading there for his 3rd and final visit, he left a note to his family. You guys might think I'm crazy in all this, but I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God if I get killed. Chau's body was never recovered, and it still remains on the island. It's believed that somewhere between 50 and 400 people inhabit the island, though some speculate it could be as few as 11. But as of right now, the government have no intention of interfering with the Sentinelese people any further. They are completely cut off, isolated from the outside world, and our knowledge of them is still rather limited. Who they are, where they come from, their language or desires. How have they survived this long, completely isolated and having no knowledge of the outside world? Well, we are still seeking answers.